All right, welcome to the second video. Let's finish our resources. So water is the last one that we'll talk about. So water as a resource only takes into consideration freshwater sources, not fresh water sources. And freshwater sources are 3% of all water. 97% is salt water. So that's our oceans. And then of all of that 3% of fresh water, roughly 30% is readily accessible for use. Around 29.7% of that 30% is groundwater, and 0.3% is surface water. So like lakes, streams, tributaries, things like that. So you may think that like lakes are huge, but they're actually 0.3% of our water source. The other 70% of that 3% is ice caps and atmospheric gases. Atmospheric gases are a very, very small amount. It's like 0.9%. So most of it is ice caps. So, like I said, most of the 30% of liquid freshwater is groundwater. It's about 29.7%. And then the availability and allocation of global water supply is limited because of a lack of sufficient and reliable data. So, we don't really know how much water we have on this earth because there's not a whole lot of reliable data everywhere. There are places like, Africa, Asia, developing nations that don't put finding resources at the top of their list because they're just trying to get to the point where the U.S. is. So we kind of are just like looking around, looking for resources that we can suck up and use, but they're just trying to get to the point where we are. So here's just a really good graphic. You're going to want to pause it and look at this. So of all water, 97 is saline or salt water. That's the same thing as salt water. 3% is fresh water. Around 30%, I think it's actually 20.9% or 29.7% is groundwater. Other sources, that's zero point 0.9 is going to be the atmosphere. And then around 69% is ice caps and glaciers. Zero point 0.3 is surface water. Of that 0.3, 87% comes in the forms of lakes, mostly three lake systems: the African Rift Valley, Lake Baikal in Russia, and our Great Lakes in America. So then 2% is rivers and 11% is swamps. And this is going down because swamps and coastal wetlands are being developed upon, and that we're losing a good source of water and flood control and pollution control with wetlands. So fight for our rights for wetlands. Okay, so economic consequences of non-local resource use. So this is resources that we get from other places, imports. So the U.S. is increasingly dependent on foreign energy sources, and the result of that is going to be we're going to see a loss of American jobs, increased prices for imported energy, and vulnerability to national security. So you wonder why we keep going into the Middle East and like poking around in there. It's mainly because of our imported energy needs, and our national security is at risk because of that. It's really just all our fault. We need to go towards renewable resources. So 1/3 of the United States trade deficit is from energy imports, and that's $300 billion lost yearly. So to put that into like something that you can quantify, we have $700 billion into our military, which is by far the most that our government puts into another government like form. So 700 billion is our military. 300 billion, so half of our military in money is lost yearly from just because we're trading imports. So the trade deficit is essentially how much you bring in versus how much you export or send out. So we are buying up more stuff from, for energy than we are exporting or selling for energy. And so that's going to be 1/3 of our trade deficit. And our trade deficit is basically like we're in debt. So that's $300 billion of debt every year from just not using renewable resources. Okay, so pollution as a result of transportation, that's a huge deal. We import these things from different countries, and every time you import something, you have to put it on a type of mechanism like a boat or a train or trucks, and those are going to pollute. Those send off fossil fuel emissions. So we're releasing emissions to get more stuff to release emissions, essentially. So coal imports are up 21.5 million tons over 6 years. Oil imports come from more than 15 countries. Lumber imports are down 50% from 2008. This is all America right here. Natural gas imports are down, and local production has increased. So, we're taking more from our own natural gas reserves, which I guess is a good thing in terms of economy. And then we get an introduction of non-native species. So, like boats coming from across the ocean are going to bring species from that side of the planet to our side of the planet. We're going to get destruction of habitats as infrastructure is built or created to supply additional resources. So infrastructure, that's like roads, pipelines, waterways, all sorts of stuff that we build to transport things. Here's just a really good example of how oil starts in one place and then it goes through all these separate processes to eventually get to your car. So every one of these processes is going to emit carbon, like CO2. So none of these things are really good for the atmosphere, and it's just so that we can get to this section right here. So that's a lot of different ways we need to go, and a lot of emissions that are coming out of these certain things to get to putting gas in our car. So fuel types and their uses. We've got non-renewables. So those are going to be nuclear. Does nuclear fuel heat places? No, it does not heat places. Does it provide electricity? Yes. Does it provide vehicle fuel? Not really, but we're working on fusion vehicles, which we use like a hydrogen converter, and the emission is water, so that's not so bad. Oil, does it provide heat? Yes. Does it provide electricity? Yes. Vehicle fuel? Heck yes, it does. What about coal? Heat? Yes. Electricity? Yes. Vehicle fuel? Not anymore. When we get vehicle fuel from coal, and you're thinking of like steamboat engines and big trains, like just shoveling coal into the engine there. So let's get to natural gas. Does it provide heat? Yes. Electricity? Yes. Vehicle fuel? Kind of. There are technologies where we can convert our car into a natural gas car. It's got less emissions, but there's not really any use for it. Renewables. So renewables are going to be water. Does it provide heat? No. Electricity? Heck yes. Vehicle fuel? No. Biomass, which that's going to be like corn, E85, ethanol, that type of stuff. That's biomass. Does it provide heat? Yes, it does. Electricity? Yes. Vehicle fuel? Yes. So this is going to be a quiz question. Biomass produces all of these things. Wind energy doesn't produce heat. It does produce a lot of electricity and not any vehicle fuel. Solar, it does provide heat. It does provide electricity. We're not quite to the technology to put it on our cars, but eventually we will be there. And then geothermal. Heat, yes. Electricity, yes. Vehicle fuel, no. Geothermal heat just uses heat from the ground, so you can't really convert that into a vehicle fuel. So let's talk about recycling. This is huge. So recycling plastic is a big deal. We've got some misconceptions, though. A few are, all plastics collected for recycling are recycled. That's just not true. A lot of the times plastic can only be recycled one more time. So a lot of the product you get is not recycled plastic. So another misconception is that the recycle symbol on the container means that it is recycled or it's recyclable. That's not necessarily true either. You have to look at the number, and the number is going to tell you where or when you can recycle that material. So another misconception is plastics are made from oil waste. That's not true. Most plastics are made from oil waste or petroleum, but some are made from natural gas resins, which that's kind of cool. We're recycling that natural gas. And so let's talk about some benefits here. You get a reduction in landfills. That's awesome. You reduce disposal costs, bring the economy up. Conserves limited natural resources when we reuse them. That's going to bring the economy up and conserve our resources. And it creates jobs, which is also going to bring the economy up. So if we think about it monetarily, recycling is awesome. And here's the numbers. Pause this. Take a second to look at this. I'm not going to go over them all. So recycling glass. This one is like near and dear to my heart right here. The main thing I want you to realize with glass is that glass is not biodegradable ever. It stays in the system. If you throw a thing of glass away, it's just going to sit in that landfill forever. So do not do that. It's horrible for the environment. But the thing about glass that's awesome is that it can be recycled an infinite number of times. You can continuously recycle glass. So if you make the conscious decision to throw glass into the trash rather than recycle it or hold on to it to recycle it later, you are doing a very, very bad thing to the environment. And I just want to say, make sure that you're cognizant of that, because it's pretty shameful to be doing this, throwing glass away when it's so easy to recycle, especially in Colorado. So 1 ton of glass recycled saves the equivalent of about 10 barrels of oil in energy, which is a lot. Most bottles and jars in America are about 25% recycled glass. Most in Europe are about 85% recycled glass. So it's time to start making a change. And 1 bottle of recycled glass saves enough energy to light a 100-watt light bulb for 4 hours. So you're just making money by recycling. So here's some really good stuff here. Take a look at it. It's awesome. Aluminum is another big one that people don't recycle enough. So to make aluminum, we actually use bauxite ore, and then we put water through it, and then we charge it with electricity. So that takes a lot of energy to make this aluminum. So if you recycle it, it's going to reduce the amount of bauxite ore mined to make aluminum, which is going to save natural resources. It's going to save energy. We're not going to have to mine all that stuff. It's super simple. Recycling aluminum has a short turnaround time. So 90 days from collection and recycling, putting it into a recycling bin, to being back on the shelf as a product. So that aluminum can that you recycle, 90 days later is going to be another aluminum can, which is awesome. 35 billion aluminum cans are thrown away every year. Don't contribute to that, please. Let's make this number go down. It's not hard. Again, it's just lazy if you're not doing it. The equivalent to 150 Exxon Valdez spills yearly. So the Exxon Valdez was a spill in Alaska where it ran aground because the captain was drunk and a bunch of oil spilled out into the ecosystem. And it cost us billions of dollars to reclaim that area, and it's still not reclaimed. It completely destroyed, or devastated, didn't destroy it, devastated that area for a good long time. So every year, we throw away, without recycling, enough aluminum cans to be the equivalent of 150 of these oil spills. So don't do that. We throw away enough aluminum in America to rebuild the whole United States commercial air fleet every 3 months. So imagine if we just recycled our aluminum, our prices of flying would go way down, because they would just use that recycled aluminum to continuously build new fleets or repair their old planes. So if you want to complain about how much it costs to fly anywhere, start recycling. That's a really simple step right there. Can recycling saves about 95% of the energy used to convert bauxite ore. And I'll show you how bauxite ore is converted, and you'll realize why 95% of that energy is saved. So look at this. These are really good little graphics here. This just shows you how much energy you can save by recycling 1 aluminum can. A computer for 3 hours. Don't throw them away, recycle them. All right, so here's bauxite and how it's transformed. It goes from a mine to a storage plant. They crush it, then they put steam through it. They turn it into water, kind of, through here. A bunch of different processes here, kind of turn it into water. The waste goes into this lake. They filter it. They heat it up, and with this heater, they put it through a bunch of other heaters. Then they put a little water into it, and they filter the end product through here, and then they end up electrifying it and turning it into alumina, which is smelted into aluminum. So it's 100 million steps go into this when you could just recycle it. So please start recycling rather than throwing away your cans. And then paper. The EPA said that paper made from recycling results in 74% less air pollution, 35% less water pollution. Recycling 1 ton of newspaper saves around 17 trees. 1 ton of writing paper saves about 7,000 gallons of water. And 1 ton of general paper keeps about 60 pounds of pollutants from entering the atmosphere. So check this out. This is just pretty much what I just said. Then the last thing we're going to talk about is green buildings. So it's the practice of developing and utilizing healthier and more resource-efficient models of construction, renovation, operation, maintenance, and demolition. The benefits are we have environmental and economic ones. Environmental, they're protecting ecosystems, biodiversity, improving water and air quality, reducing solid waste, and conserving natural resources. Economic, we reduce operating costs, we increase the value and profits of businesses, and it increases the productivity and satisfaction of people working there. So here's a green building, and then we'll have another video on biofuels and that.